All right. So with that, thanks so much again to everyone who's joining us for our monthly immigration series webinar. If you haven't already, I want to encourage folks to introduce themselves in the chat. Let us know your name, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from tonight. I see some folks have already done that, but encourage others to drop that in the chat. And then as always, I will follow up excuse me, I will follow up either later tonight or tomorrow with links to the recording, the slides, and any additional resources that we discussed today. So do not worry about that. You'll get that in a follow-up email. And also, if anybody that you know may be registered but wasn't able to join us, they'll be included in that follow-up email. So definitely be on the lookout from that. But again, I encourage folks to introduce themselves into the chat. Welcome. I see folks from Oakland, Sacramento, Yolo County. Welcome, everyone. All right, so I will be your host today. Luis Ojeda, I am Interim Organizing Director. I'm going to walk you all through today's slides. And again, we'll follow a similar agenda as we usually do. Do some immigration updates from across the country as well as here in our state, and then have some time for Q&A, and then wrap up by sharing some upcoming and current advocacy opportunities that folks can engage in and participate. All right, so in the last month, lots has happened. Obviously, one of the things that folks are paying attention to right now is the current government shutdown. So I did want to sort of pause and acknowledge that. And share a little bit about what's going on related to immigration and how the government shutdown is impacting it. There's this great explainer here that I'm linking by the American Immigration Council that shares a little bit of information about what the shutdown means for immigration. So a quote from that document, it says, because most of ICE's work is deemed essential, law enforcement work, enforcement and deportation operations would continue without significant impact during a shutdown. And then it also notes a little bit of context from the last time we had a government shutdown in 2022. ICE estimated that during a shutdown, it would have to furlough about 17% of its employees, but they anticipate that the impact of a shutdown on ICE would be more minimal this year. In particular, they point out the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as it's called, which provided ICE with $30 billion for enforcement, $5 billion for detention to be spent through September of 2029. So they're very much flush with cash right now. So this unprecedented level of funding can continue even if the broader federal government shuts down. And this includes hiring and expansion of its workforce. I have seen certain government officials say things like folks from ICE are going without pay. So I'm a little bit unclear on what the actual reality is, but again, our understanding here is that the government is still able to use this funding for immigration enforcement. And as we'll talk about, and as I'm sure you've all seen, there's plenty of that happening, and there's plenty of immigration in our communities all across the country. So again, the government shutdown at the moment, at least, has not meant a slowdown in terms of the work that ICE is doing to arrest and deport our community. So just wanted to pause and note that. And obviously, this is a very much a moment where lots can happen and everything is changing. And so we could have a change in this in terms of the government reopening, or this could be prolonged and it could last longer. We really don't know at this moment. So there's that. Another big piece of news and things that we're watching right now also is related to National Guard deployment that's happening all across the country. So obviously in the past, we've talked about the deployment in Southern California and Los Angeles. The number of troops there is now down to only 300. We talked about the deployment in Washington, D.C., I should say, which is currently at about 2,400 troops that are currently deployed in D.C. And so that's grown a little bit since we last talked. And then, as I'm sure you all have heard, about 200 National Guard from Texas have arrived in Chicago. And so that's sort of the next place where there's some activity expected, and some deployment of the National Guard is expected to expand. But as of now, it's only started at 200. And then additionally, I'm sure you have also heard Portland, which is another city that the administration was attempting to deploy National Guard. So far, there are not any, but there was an attempt to federalize the Oregon National Guard, and then also to send National Guard from California and other states. But as of yet, those efforts have been blocked by the courts. But again, this is very much an evolving situation, and things could obviously change. And I think some of the reports that I was looking at and reading seem to indicate that the California National Guard, for example, had already sort of been mobilized and was definitely would have been deployed if the court hadn't intervened. But again, we'll see how this news changes in the coming days and weeks, because I'm sure this is not the end of this situation. And then we've talked about some of these cities, but obviously cities like San Francisco, Memphis, Baltimore, and New Orleans have also been mentioned as places where the administration is interested in sending National Guard. And then additionally, he has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, which obviously would be highly, highly controversial. And obviously there's lots of concerns related to what that would mean and the amount of power that that would give the president. There is this petition that we want to encourage folks to sign, essentially telling Congress to take action in this moment and to clarify and essentially say that the federal government should not be using the National Guard for these purposes in the way that we're seeing all across the country. And again, this is just the beginning. This is only a handful of cities, and it's likely to get even worse. And it's likely going to need the intervention of the Supreme Court. And so we'll see sort of where that ends up. But again, lots can change here. I did want to take a moment to just also uplift everything that's going on in Chicago. So as I mentioned earlier, only about 200 National Guard are deployed there as of today. But again, that number could grow exponentially to the thousands, just as it did with Los Angeles and DC. But this is part of the Trump administration's so-called Operation Midway Blitz, which is a program the DHS is essentially trying to go after immigrants and undocumented folks in Chicago, again, attacking local elected officials and really claiming that there's an invasion happening and that there's riots and that these cities are, that they have no control of these cities, which obviously if folks have seen videos mocking all that, you can see folks who are clearly pointing out that the description that the administration is providing of all these various cities is clearly wrong. And much of the discussion around this is really pointing to the fact that the administration is really trying to escalate the situation within these cities and really exacerbating the protests and really trying to essentially push folks in various different ways. I did want to include this link here that has some coverage from, I believe, from Democracy Now! From today's episode that covered a terrifying scene at an apartment complex that hopefully folks had heard about, that essentially had like an overnight raid that got a lot of attention. They used armed agents, flashbangs, helicopters, and military-style vans and trucks, and this resulted in about 37 people being arrested. But folks may have seen images of, doors being knocked down, even folks who were citizens being arrested or at least momentarily apprehended, children also being caught up in that raid, and essentially just really causing a lot of devastation and havoc in that community, not just for those who live there, but just the surrounding neighborhood as well. And again, just sort of these scenes, right out of a movie or something that folks maybe wouldn't necessarily associate with an immigration raid. So again, definitely some very scary images coming out of Chicago. And again, this is all part of this effort to expand immigration enforcement in Chicago. Another thing that I wanted to also note that I'm sure folks also probably saw, Chicago Alderwoman Jessie Fuentes was also arrested by ICE agents on Friday inside a hospital in Chicago. It seems like ICE was attempting to arrest someone who had injured themselves while they were interacting with ICE or trying to get away from them. And then they ended up going to the hospital, and it seemed like ICE was intending to arrest the individual. And the alderwoman was essentially asking them if they had a warrant and asking them that question over and over. And in the end, she ended up being arrested. She was later released. But again, in this moment where ICE is not respecting our rights and really is trying to act like this is the Wild West, I think this was another great example, not a great example, but another example of the way that ICE is failing to respect our rights. And all the Alderwoman Jessie Fuentes was trying to do was ask the question about the warrant and whether they even had one, and it was clear that they did not, and they were still trying to arrest the individual. Another thing to note in terms of what's going on in Chicago as well, that the Chicago mayor, Brandon Johnson, also signed an ICE-free zone executive order, which prohibits federal immigration agents from using any city-owned property in their ongoing operations. So again, this is an attempt by local government to do something to try and limit the way the activities that ICE is taking and limit the ways that local government maybe potentially inadvertently or without meaning to collaborate with ICE. So this is an interesting example, again, of the way that local government is responding. So it is something to keep in mind. And obviously the governor there as well has been very vocal of the administration. And then wasn't sure if I wanted to include this, but again, I think this is an important to just highlight the way that the administration is talking about this issue and immigration as a whole. So I'm sure, again, folks saw this. Obviously, AI generated image here, but also pointing out this so-called change from the Department of Defense to Department of War. So really just a chilling reminder of the direction that the administration is going in terms of how they are viewing the use of the military and the armed forces to essentially go after folks, not just in Chicago, but all across the country. So again, evolving situation and lots can happen, but again, we really look at what's happening in all other cities as a reminder of what could happen in our communities as well, in terms of how we can prepare in the event that these types of ICE raids or National Guard deployments happen in our communities as well. It really is difficult to prepare for, but again, who knows how this situation may evolve. Additionally, I also want to take a moment to talk about DACA. There's been a lot of discussion and rumors and articles being posted about potentially some changes happening with DACA. And so we just wanted to highlight this piece and also provide this explainer from the National Immigration Law Center, which highlights that nothing at the moment has changed when it comes to DACA and who's eligible. But things could change in the coming weeks due to a court case that's pending. There's a decision that should be coming out, and there's some rumors or some speculation in terms of what the implications of that could be. Part of that could mean that folks who are applying for DACA for their first time may be eligible, and there may be some changes to DACA status for folks who are in Texas. And so again, none of that is for certain and none of that is currently happening. But we want to encourage folks to seek legal advice from immigration attorneys if they have DACA or they think that they may be eligible for it. And again, once something comes out and once there is more concrete announcements around this, obviously we want to encourage folks to share that information and make sure they're being mindful of the type of information and where they're getting it from and all of that. And so it's really important in this moment not to get scammed or to let ourselves be taken advantage of by folks who may be taking advantage of this moment of uncertainty. And then I think this is another important thing that is noted, that about 20 immigrants with DACA have been arrested this year by ICE. So I think the sort of narrative that folks are trying to uplift here is that even folks with DACA who are generally meant to be protected by immigration, from immigration arrests, I should say, that hasn't been the case. And there's been big national names of folks and stories from all across the country of immigrants, many of them immigration or immigrants' rights advocates, excuse me, who have been arrested. And so, again, it's an evolving situation. The Trump administration has also sort of hinted at potentially ending the program, as he did in his first administration. That obviously did not end up happening. But again, there is a pending court case related to DACA overall as a program that could have some implications in terms of the future of the program, and there could be some changes. But again, I want to emphasize that none of that has happened yet. And so anybody who has DACA and has to renew, encourage that to continue happening, but to be on the lookout for some potential changes to the program or potentially even expansions in the coming weeks once that happens. But again, if you or someone has DACA, or you work with folks who have DACA, encourage folks to take a look at this explainer by the National Immigration Law Center that has more information. Wonderful. Okay, I'm seeing a question here on the Q&A. Is there any indication that Chicago was instigated by the apartment building landlord or was specifically targeted by ICE? That's a great question. I'm not sure what led to the ICE activity at that location. I've heard or I've read statements from DHS and others about alleged gang activity, but I'm not sure what is essentially what led to that or how it all came about. So I think that's a good question to note. But I will also say that I think it's been made pretty clear by immigration and ICE that they often don't need a reason, right? I think they've been going to restaurants and out in the street and schools, and I think it's sort of a free-for-all in this moment. I wanted to pause as well to just highlight this case. I'm not sure if folks heard about this journalist, Mario Guevara. He was a journalist in Georgia that was recently deported to El Salvador after spending over 100 days in immigration detention in Georgia. So despite clearly identifying himself as press, Mario Guevara was arrested by local law enforcement in June while reporting on a protest against the Trump administration near Atlanta. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, took him into custody. Prosecutors quickly dropped the charges after confirming he was complying with law enforcement, and an immigration judge granted him bond. But immigration officials refused to release him, claiming that live streaming law enforcement activity makes him a threat. The ACLU filed an emergency habeas petition, arguing that his detention is unconstitutional, retaliation against protected First Amendment activities, since he was a journalist. But all of that ended up with him being deported. And he had lived in the US for more than 2 decades and was eligible for a green card through his US citizen son, and should never have been jailed in the first place. So this was really unfortunate. I think folks were really trying to do everything they could to stop his deportation. But again, this sort of pattern that we're seeing of the administration and ICE overall going after folks of all kinds, including folks who are journalists, and again, clearly trying to go after him because he was live streaming the event and essentially calling him a threat. There's a letter that he wrote prior to his deportation while he was detained that I wanted to just sort of note, to highlight a segment of it, and then the full letter is also linked there if you want to take a look at it to learn more about his story. So he said, "May God grant that in the not too distant future, love and mercy overcome the racial hatred that is dividing this beautiful nation, and that the American people understand that calling oneself Christian includes respect for and support for foreigners." They were really powerful words in this letter, and I think just wanted to share that with folks in terms of just, again, another example of what's going on all across the country, and the way that folks are being impacted by immigration and deportation as well. Did judges agree with the DHS's claim that Mario Guevara was a threat? Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think there seem to be some disagreements in terms of the specifics of the situation, but again, because there was an immigration judge that granted him bond, but the administration refused to release him, and then again ended up deporting him. So it's one of those situations where even though it seems like he should have been released, that obviously is not what ended up happening. And so again, folks are being caught up in this deportation dragnet and system, even when they shouldn't be. And obviously there's even greater attacks on the media beyond this. But I think also just wanted to highlight this as someone who was both an immigrant and a journalist. Another thing I wanted to highlight was a recent lawsuit related to courthouse arrests and ICE conditions. So the lawsuit was filed by the ACLU of Northern California, along with other immigrants' rights organizations and attorneys. It's a class action lawsuit against the Trump administration challenging its policy of courthouse arrests in Northern California, as well as the prolonged detention of immigrants in unsafe and unlawful conditions at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's San Francisco field office. So I'm sure folks have heard of this, and I know there's folks in the webinar tonight that have heard about this happening in your own community, whether you're in San Francisco or in other parts of the state, where folks are being picked up at courthouses when they're attending their court hearings, and also when they are going to do their ICE check-ins as well. They're often being arrested at those situations as well. So here's a quote by Lauren Davis, my colleague, legal fellow here at ACLU NorCal. To meet an arbitrary arrest quota, the Trump administration has rescinded a policy that protected access to immigration courts. Courthouse arrests are unlawful, deceptive, and take advantage of people's belief that they will be treated fairly in our legal system. Arresting immigrants attending their mandatory court hearings is a cruel bait and switch with life-changing consequences, and we are asking the court to put an end to this practice. So there's a link there where you can read more about this lawsuit. But I also wanted to highlight the ICE condition component, which when I read this, I was horrified by it. The lawsuit also challenges ICE's arbitrary decision, to waive its own 12-hour limit on detention in temporary holding facilities like the field office. This policy change was enacted in service of the Trump administration's arbitrary quota of 3,000 daily arrests, with no consideration of humane alternatives. Detainees report being held for days in small, constantly illuminated, freezing rooms without a bed, proper sanitation, medical care, or privacy. In one case cited in the filing, ICE denied a man experiencing symptoms of paralysis medical help until an attorney taught him how to ask ICE for help in English. Additionally, attorneys are generally barred from the facility after 3 p.m. and on weekends, and detainees must use the costly, poor quality phone system to call for legal help, severely impeding their ability to challenge their detention. Additional accounts of detention laid out in the suit include people are forced to urinate and defecate in an open toilet in front of each other. Detainees are forced to clean the shared toilet with dry wads of toilet paper. People are forced to sleep on cold metal benches or directly on the floor, sometimes next to the open toilet. People are given nothing for warmth except a thin disposable foil blanket. People are held for multiple days without a change of clothes, medication, or hygiene products. And then detainees are subjected to bright lights 24 hours a day in freezing temperatures, a combination recognized by the United Nations as a form of torture and sleep deprivation. Obviously, this is not unique to the San Francisco field office. This is probably happening all across the country, in whether that's a field office or a detention center, or any place where people are being held by ICE. But again, we're hoping that this lawsuit will lead to some changes in terms of how ICE and immigration are conducting courthouse arrests, and hopefully lead to an improvement in these conditions. But again, really just awful conditions that folks are dealing with. And again, we're continuing to monitor these situations. So encourage folks to be on the lookout as well. Again, if you hear about these courthouse arrests happening in your community, and also want to uplift the local rapid response networks to ensure that folks are flagging to them when these events take place. More bad news, unfortunately. When it comes to temporary protection status or TPS, we've talked about this in the past, and this was an ongoing challenge that folks were engaging in, including the ACLU of Northern California around TPS. Earlier this year, the Trump administration attempted to end TPS for Venezuelan immigrants, as well as many other immigrants from many other countries, but specifically for immigrants from Venezuela. The Supreme Court recently granted the Trump administration's request to stay a federal court decision protecting Venezuelans with TPS while it appeals a lower court's ruling. And so this essentially means that the Supreme Court is greenlighting, allowing the Trump administration to move forward with ending TPS. And this is going to impact in total about 600,000 people. So here's a statement from Emmy McLean, senior staff attorney with ACLU NorCal. This decision is heartbreaking, callous, and lawless. Without reasoning, the Supreme Court ignored a district court's final decision based on evidence and argument and issued an unexplained order that rips humanitarian legal status from 600,000 people practically overnight. If the law means anything, the government's baseless requests should have been denied. Instead, the Supreme Court has allowed Secretary Noem to exercise unbridled power that has no basis in law. So we obviously were not happy with this decision and vehemently disagree with it. But obviously this is the Supreme Court's decision. And again, it's going to lead to devastating impacts for Venezuelans with TPS in this country. Some of these folks are going to immediately lose TPS, and others will lose it later in the year. And so, again, this is just one of many countries that previously had TPS that the administration has gone after in trying to really end all of these legal protections that immigrants previously had. So, again, bad news there, and obviously very sad news, but also just wanted to take a moment to highlight that as well. Gosh, here's an example of Trump's newly announced gold card. So they have announced that they intend to create this so-called Trump gold card. Immigrants are able to pay $1 million, or corporations can sponsor people for at least $2 million to get this form of this visa, I should say. They plan to issue about 80,000 cards. So, you can do the math there in terms of the amount of money that they will be charging. But obviously this is helpful for a very small segment of the overall immigrant population, I would say. I would venture to guess that most immigrants are unable to pay that $1 million fee. And that there's probably only a small select number of corporations that are able to afford this $2 million sponsorship opportunity. And so clearly is targeted at certain immigrants and is not very helpful to most. They've also discussed this idea of a platinum card that would allow immigrants to spend up to 270 days in the country without paying taxes on their non-US income. So we'll see what happens there. Related as well, last month the administration recently announced that a new $100,000 fee, $100,000 fee, I should say, for H-1B visas was being imposed, and this is generally for high-skilled workers. So again, the administration is using these fees to obviously raise funds, but also to limit the actual opportunities that people have to take advantage of visas and other legal status that were previously available. But yeah, this image is pretty wild. To close up some of these national updates, wanted to point to a press release that DHS put out last month on September 23rd. They claim that over 2 million immigrants have left or have been removed from the country since the beginning of the administration on January 20th. So the claim is that 1.6 million immigrants have voluntarily self-deported. It's unclear how they arrived at that number, but again, this is the number that they are claiming. But in addition to that, they claim that 400,000 people have been deported and that they are on track to reach 600,000 deportations by the end of the year. So as we've talked in the past, these are huge numbers. Obviously, this is pretty unprecedented. And again, just want to remind folks, I think it's very easy, obviously, to get to look at this number and really not remember that this is 400,000 neighbors, 400,000 people in our community that are impacted by this. And then obviously everyone else that's part of that, their family, their loved ones, their community members and coworkers, etc. And me personally, I'm in Fresno. Our population is 500,000. So to think that essentially it's about the whole city essentially being removed is pretty enormous. And obviously, again, as folks are pointing out, it's hard to verify these numbers, in particular the first one in terms of 1.6 million people voluntarily being self-deported, or self-deporting themselves, I should say. But I think in terms of these numbers, these deportation numbers are numbers that they often, or they do track. And so I would venture to guess that the bottom number is likely to be more accurate. Thanks, Miranda. There's some more numbers that we can see. So for context, there are about 500,000 foster youth in the American foster care system. So that's equivalent to eradicating foster care in less than a year. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Because yeah, again, it's really easy to look at this number and sort of just see it as a number, but again, to really think about the impact and what that number truly means, I think is important. All right, I'm going to move to some state updates that we wanted to share. There's not too many here, but did want to take a moment to pause and recognize that Governor Newsom did sign, excuse me, a handful of pro-immigrant bills. So this includes SB 627, which we've previously discussed in these webinars, which prohibits law enforcement from covering their face to hide their identity. Each bill here that I'm going to talk about is linked here, so you can also take a look at to see more details. And more importantly, you can also see how your local state representative voted on these bills as well. So obviously there's some concerns about this bill being challenged. And so we'll see sort of how that pans out. But again, this is a way that California is at least attempting to address this issue of ICE agents being masked and trying to cover their identity. And then related to ICE and identification, SB 805 was also signed. This requires law enforcement to visibly display identification. So the pair of those bills really go a long way in terms of just trying to have more transparency and shed more light on who is actually engaging in these arrests by ICE, and hopefully is going to lead to more transparency. SB 81 also seeks to limit ICE enforcement at health facilities and limits data sharing. So this is also important. As we've talked about in the past, we have things that were known as sensitive locations. So generally schools, health clinics, churches were generally places where ICE would not go. But again, as we've seen, that is no longer the case. Those sensitive locations are no longer being recognized. And so this is an attempt to offer some protection when it comes to health facilities. And then SB 98 requires schools to notify parents, teachers, staff of ICE enforcement at schools. So again, an attempt to create more awareness and have more transparency when it comes to the way that schools are being part of the immigration locations where immigration is, I should say. Another bill is AB 49, which limits ICE enforcement at schools. and then also provides for new model policies by December. So if folks were on a previous webinar, I think back in April, we talked about model policies that the Attorney General in the state have put out for schools to implement at the local level. These policies are going to be updated by December to again really meet this moment and really take into account all the different ways that that ICE is arresting folks. So again, all of these are linked. Encourage folks to take a look at those, read more about them. You can read the text. There's some, I believe this one, for example, takes effect next summer, if I'm not mistaken. I believe there is a little bit of a window for implementation. And then also in the signing of this bill, Governor Newsom essentially suggested that there's likely going to be sort of a fix-it bill, or a bill that sort of amends or addresses some of the concerns that were raised here related to exemptions and clarifying what constitutes as face covering and what isn't. So again, want to encourage folks to definitely be on the lookout and to read more about the impacts of these bills, and to remind folks that we know that we have to do even more, because just as you know, we're passing new bills and new bills are being passed, ICE and immigration are also changing their tactics and refusing to comply with laws and respecting people's rights and all that. So it's really important for folks to also continue to advocate for more immigration bills at the state level and more work to be done. And then here as well is linked the press release that the Governor Newsom's office released highlighting all these bills, which has a little bit more information about the passage of these bills. One thing I did want to note in that statement, the governor uplifted the fact that the state has collaborated with ICE, he said 10,000 times, if I'm not mistaken, during his tenure as governor. So really highlighting this collaboration that the governor seems to be proud of. And if folks remember in the past, there were bills like the Vision Act and others that were trying to go beyond the California Values Act that the governor vetoed. And so again, I think that these are obviously good things that these bills have passed, but again, lots of more work that we need to do and lots more that the state could be doing. So we want to encourage the governor and state legislators to continue doing more. Another update as well in terms of the LA raids. I think if folks haven't probably heard about this, there was sort of a temporary moment where folks were celebrating. There was a federal judge that essentially called out ICE and the Department of Homeland Security for the way that they were conducting raids. And then the Supreme Court intervened and essentially put a pause on this restraining order that had previously been issued. And here's a statement here by Mohammed Tazar, senior staff attorney at ACLU of Southern California. So this decision is a devastating setback for our plaintiffs and communities who for months have been subjected to immigration stops because of the color of their skin, occupation, or the language they speak. In running to the Supreme Court to request this stay, the government made clear that its enforcement operation in Southern California is driven by race. We will continue fighting the administration's racist deportation scheme to ensure every person living in Southern California, regardless of race or status, is safe. So yeah, super concerning. The Supreme Court essentially allowing DHS to continue to essentially racially profile immigrants and go after people based, again, color of their skin, occupation, or language they speak. So it's, again, deeply concerning and highly problematic. But again, this is not the end of this. There's going to be continued efforts to continue to challenge this practice by the Department of Homeland Security to go after folks based on the color of their skin. So lots coming out of the Supreme Court that is not good, which is not new, unfortunately. Seeing a comment, can we be careful with legitimizing terms like self-deport? A person can choose to leave, but removal proceedings are specified in the INA. There is no such thing as a self-deportation. Great point, Bernice. Okay, another thing that I wanted to highlight was related to San Francisco data sharing of automatic license plate readers. There is a couple of state laws that are pointing out here. So since 2016, sharing of automatic license plate readers data with out-of-state or federal agencies for any reason violates California law, SB 34. And if this data is shared for the purpose of assisting with immigration enforcement agencies, it violates SB 54, the California Values Act. There was a recent news article that highlighted that San Francisco PD, there was an investigation that showed that they were potentially sharing data. And so the Electronic Frontier Foundation and the ACLU of Northern California are urging SFPD to launch a thorough audit of its ALPR database, institute new protocols for compliance, and assess penalties and sanctions for any employee found to be sharing ALPR information out of state. So I'm going to play this video for folks, and hopefully everything works good. If folks could just give me a thumbs up just to make sure the video works once I hit play, that would be helpful. And hopefully we don't have any issues.
If you drive in San Francisco, there's a good chance information about your travel patterns is stored in a database fed by the city's vast network of 400 automated license plate readers. Although state law prohibits sharing this data with federal and out-of-state law enforcement agencies, the San Francisco Police Department reportedly let outside agencies run 1.6 million illegal searches of the city's license plate reader database. At least 19 of those searches were marked as related to ICE. ICE could use this information to locate, detain, and deport immigrants. Police from states that criminalize abortion could use it to monitor vehicles near clinics and track visitors who come to San Francisco for abortion care. We've been down this road before. After we sued Marin County in 2021, the sheriff agreed to stop illegally sharing millions of driver license plates and locations with ICE and other agencies outside of California. For now, we want proof SFPD has ended this unlawful data sharing, and the department should put safeguards in place to ensure it doesn't happen again. We should all be able to drive to work or to the doctor's office without fearing that the government will track our movements and pry into our private lives.
Great. Okay. Hopefully folks saw that video. I got a thumbs up and I'm seeing someone said, where is the video link? So if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, if the audio wasn't coming through for you, you'll be able to just click this link here when I send out the slides and watch the video. But yeah, I just want to highlight this super deeply concerning, as was pointed out here, 1.6 million searches of San Francisco license plate reader data. San Francisco was only one of a handful, I believe, agencies that that did this. So there's going to be ongoing work to shed light on what happened, why it happened, and ensure that it doesn't happen again. But this is an important piece here that obviously it could be a violation of SB 54, the California Values Act, but it also could have other implications when it comes to tracking of abortion access and other issues. And so this really does go beyond just immigration. But I think this is a really important reminder for folks to ensure that we are asking questions, right, about how local government is sharing data potentially, what restrictions are in place, how are they making sure that they're abiding by the law to make sure that this data does not get into the wrong hands, because we know not only other states who have anti-abortion laws or other restrictions on abortion or have anti-immigrant laws, but obviously the federal government may potentially also be interested in that information. So an issue that I'm sure will continue that we'll continue to discuss in the future. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pause for a Q&A. So I think if folks could either raise their hand, I think that would probably be the most helpful. And then I'll go ahead and allow you to unmute. So again, anything that we discussed today, any questions based on that, and then we'll move into talking about some ways that folks could take action in the coming days and weeks. Okay. Not seeing any hands raised, and I'm going to see if I missed anything in the chat. I didn't see anything in, oh, thank you, Miranda. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, and hopefully that'll work.
Okay, thank you. I did have a question. I think early on in the slides, you had mentioned something about like family separations, and I put it in the chat, but I wanted to flag it that I'm on a work group with American Bar Association on sibling rights for children that are detained. And so the conversation came up again. I brought up at the beginning of the year, it was sort of dismissed, but it has been brought back to the group by somebody else, and there seems to be consensus about partnering with the immigration community on what that looks like for the youth in regard to like sibling separations once their family's been separated due to immigration.
Great. Thank you for flagging that. Yeah, I think that that's definitely an ongoing and growing issue. I think even in the example of the apartments that were raided in Chicago, I think some of the articles highlighted that some parents were detained and obviously leaving, or not obviously, but and leaving behind some children. And then there was a report recently by CNN that highlighted about 100 young folks that were impacted by the arrest of their parents and essentially being caught up into the system. And so thank you for raising that. And yeah, I'm sure that it's something that it's going to continue to be an issue, unfortunately. Thank you, Amelia, for dropping that link to the ALPR video from on our Instagram. All right, Bernice, I'm going to head and ask you to unmute.
Yes, I had a similar or related question. We are doing work with our county in order to prepare for a disaster such as a raid or impending health crisis. Does the ACLU have anything to guide what Child Protective Services may want to do in preparation of something like what happened to Chicago?
Yeah, great question. I'm definitely going to follow up with you and Miranda on this. I don't know off the top of my mind if we have any specific resources on this issue, but I can definitely find out. And then if not, we can definitely figure out who would be the best organization or other group to reach out to. But thank you so much for raising that.
Thank you.
All right, Annie, maybe one more question. Okay, I'm going to move on, but if folks have additional questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A or into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, we've got a few advocacy opportunities that I wanted to highlight, but before we do that, I wanted to take a moment to remind everybody to take care of themselves. As I was putting together these slides, I could not help but feel very depressed and sad about the moment that we're currently in. And just, again, just seeing the devastating and widespread impact that the actions of this administration is having on our communities. So definitely want to encourage folks to take care of yourself, take a moment to slow down and do what you need to do in this moment to really take care of yourself, because I think it can be easily very overwhelming. And every day it feels like there's a new crisis or headline that is overwhelming. So definitely want to encourage folks to slow down. And so with that, it is Banned Books Week. So happy Banned Books Week to everybody. Here's some things that we want to encourage folks to do: to read your favorite banned book, defend freedom of speech in schools, show appreciation for librarians and educators, remind our community how books allow us to learn about new perspectives, experiences, and places, and then get another banned book from your local library. Reading is a great way to relax. So hopefully it's not a book that's going to cause more pain and suffering. But yeah, want to encourage folks to do that. In terms of what's coming up, National has been doing this Organizing to Protect Democracy training series online. and they have the last of a 4-part series happening tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, but 5 p.m. Pacific time. And so this is going to be focused on organizing effectively in your community, having persuasive conversations that move people to action, and then build lasting connections with others who are ready to rise to the movement. So this is really geared towards folks who maybe are new to organizing or want to learn more skills. There's a link here that I will include in the follow-up email for folks if they want to register. I believe they were all recorded as well. They might be available online. So I will include the link to past series if I can find that online for folks to look at. But again, feel free to share these. These are public facing trainings. And so feel free to invite anybody who might be interested in that. And then next Saturday, there is a nationwide day of action, No Kings. Millions of people across the country took to the streets in June. Next Saturday, it's happening again. We encourage you to attend your local event. There are so many amazing events being planned all across the country and all across our great state. There's a link here, nokings.org. You can go see the map and check out a bunch of other resources to make sure that you're attending your local event because there's literally one in, I'm not going to say every city, but in so many cities. So you don't have to go far to go to your local event. Additionally, and to help you out in preparation of October 18th, on October 15th, next Wednesday, there is a protest safety, know your rights, and de-escalation training that's happening that's geared towards No Kings Day, October 18th. There's one at 4 p.m. in English and then one at 5:30 p.m. in Spanish. So encourage folks to register even if you can't attend. You'll get the recording of those. And you can also go to nokings.org to get additional resources on there. Lots of resources there about know your rights and how to prepare and how to prepare to go for these events. But definitely want to uplift these events that are happening. This is not an event that's about one thing. It can be about multiple things. It can be about immigration. It can be about whatever issue you're passionate about. It's going to be huge. Again, I think it was 6 million people was sort of the number that was being floated around in June that took action at the last No Kings Day. And so organizers are hoping for even more this year. And so that's really powerful to just see so many people out in the streets doing rallies, doing marches, and really uplifting their voice. Because I think in this moment, it is really important for us to connect with other people who are just as mad and frustrated as we are, and to really channel that frustration into action to figure out how we can make sure that we build a better country. Additionally, a programming note, we will not have an immigration series next month in November, but we will return on Tuesday, December 2nd at 5:30 p.m. As we look back at everything that has taken place this year, which is really wild to think about that it's almost the end of the year and we'll be at almost 1 year of this administration. But with that, we do want to invite folks to join us on Wednesday, November 12th at 5:30 p.m. when we do a legislative wrap-up and election recap webinar. So we'll be talking about all the various bills that we worked on as the ACLU, let you all know whether they were signed or not and what happened to them, and maybe give you a little preview about some of the work that we might be doing for next year. And then also there's an election, so we'll definitely recap the results for that and share what happened and look at the results and what they mean. So that link will be there for you to register. So I want to encourage folks to do so. And so with that, we'll go ahead and close out. Thank you all so much for joining us. I will follow up with folks that I committed to following up. And again, everyone will get a link to the slides, the recording, and all of the links that we shared. Hope you all have a lovely night. Thank you all so much.